So I've been a pastor full-time vocationally since 1991. So I've been doing this for a long time. And I've done a lot of funeral services. I've done funeral services for people I didn't even know who they were, because I make this offer to funeral directors that if you have a family that doesn't have a pastor, or they don't have any religious moorings of any sort, I'd be happy to come do their service for your loved one's service. And I've been called on several times to do exactly that. And I've got a great story, but I'm not going to tell you. Stop me afterwards. I'll tell you the coolest story. I'll just tell you, these guys were all motorcycle people. Look up here, okay? Do you see a motorcycle guy up here? So it was really interesting. I had fun with that. So it reminded me of a story that I heard a long time ago about two brothers that lived in a small town, and they were both scoundrels. They were cheaters. They had beaten people up in the town, and the whole town hated these two guys. Well, the one brother passed away, and the brother left behind went to the local pastor. Now, the denomination that you don't like, fill in the blank right there. We used to say Baptist, but I'm not in a Baptist church, so that'd be very unfair right now. So went to the non-denominational church or whatnot, and he said, Pastor, at the funeral service tomorrow, I know that you don't have hardly any good things to say about my brother. But I have a check here for $10,000 that I'm going to give to the church if you will tell the church family that my brother was a saint. Of course, what pastor's going to turn that down? So he took the $10,000 check. So at the funeral the next day, he's up there and he gets up to give the eulogy, and he says, what I want you to know about that guy in the casket is he was a dirty, no good, lying person that the whole town hated. But compared to his brother, he was a saint. Oh, I've been waiting a long time to tell that one. But like I told my kids one year, I'd love to know what you would say about me at my funeral service. Like, we don't get to hear that. So many times I've done the funeral service, and the person, well, a couple of times I've heard people stand up and say things about the person. I go like, did they put the wrong person in there? I don't know if that's true or not, you know. But like, wouldn't you love to know what people say about you? Like all the good things, and I've heard marvelous, wonderful things about people. And I've thought so I actually emailed all my kids and I said, could you give me the eulogy that you would share about me? And my kids sent me, I think a couple of them did, and just sent me some things to say, this is what I would say about you, Dad. Like, this is the legacy that you have left, right? And then that got me thinking, like, people's legacy. So let's do a little group project here real quick. So like, if I'm going to say the name of a person, you tell me what their legacy was, all right? Here we go. Thomas Edison. Light bulb. I mean, a million other things. But that's the one thing we kind of get from Thomas Edison. How about this one? This will be a little harder for our audience. George Washington Carver. Peanuts, right. 300 ways to use little peanut. Isn't that amazing? George Washington Carver. How about, I'm going a little direction here, Rosa Parks. She decided she was I've been right near that bus station, driving a tractor trailer. Funny things that your pastor's done in the past, but yeah. And she actually would not go to the back of the bus where blacks were supposed to sit back then. She said, I'm sitting up here. And it changed everything. That's her legacy, Rosa Parks. What about Henry Ford? Duh, that's low-hanging fruit, right? What did you say? Yeah, automobile, cars, right? How about, this is one of my favorite guys, is Yogi Berra. Baseball, what else about Yogi? His jokes, oh man, he was quippy. He was super quippy. One of the things he said was a nickel ain't worth a dime anymore. Isn't that hilarious? Isn't that so? Oh man, I'm not going to go there. I could, but man, if you've never read all of his jokes, man, he was so quippy. He was in a bar in New York City, and somebody said, "Hey, did you see?" They introduced him to Ernest Hemingway, and Yogi goes, "Which paper do you write for, Ernie?" And last Thursday, I was actually right in front of Ernest Hemingway's house in Key West. So yeah. And then there's other people like Jack the Ripper. Not a good legacy, right? Ted Bundy, Charles Manson. When I mention those names, you go like, not good, not good. So there's good legacies and there's bad legacies, and Jesus even had one of those guys. His name was Judas, right? So the question is like, what kind of legacy do you want to leave? And this applies to everybody in this room, even the young people, even you young guys. Guys is a generic term for people that are from Cleveland, Cincinnati, Cleveland. That we say guys, that means girls and guys. Okay, so like, it applies to you as well. Like you are building your legacy today, even if you're 12 years old. Believe it or not, you're already in the process of building that legacy. And I want to look at Nehemiah, and there's a lot of things we could say about this text. But I just want to pull out, because he makes some statements here that I believe really cut to the core of where he was at this point, at the end of his career then. And he's saying, like, what will my legacy be? So if you don't mind, join me in Nehemiah. It's in the Old Testament, chapter 13. We have an app that you can download on your phone called, not we, somebody else has, the U version. And you can go to events on the lower right-hand side, click on it, go to events, and you can get all the notes, the Bible verses, and even the study guide that we write each week is available there. But I want to just look at Nehemiah at the end of his life. And just to remind you, some things about Nehemiah that I mentioned in the very first week. That Nehemiah, there's one thing that could be said about him. He was just faithful. The dude showed up. He bloomed where he was planted. He didn't say like, well, man, I'm stuck in this Susa or in Babylon, and I'm not even where my home country is. I can't do anything. No, he said, I can do what only I can do. And the things that he did kind of got delivered to him. It was minding his own business when it happened. I even said that if Nehemiah had TikTok, he would say he understood the assignment. He bloomed where he's planted. And my wife said to me after I said this, he said that Nehemiah said, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I got, my wife says, you do know that's not in the Bible, right? Yeah, I do. So apparently I didn't mention that. So that's not in the Bible. That's Alcoholics Anonymous. That's their prayer. But it's true about him. But he wanted to have a faithful legacy. So let's just sort through chapter 13 here, and I want to point out, number one, Nehemiah's faithful reforms, and it's a summary of some of the things he did, and then I want to talk about his faithful legacy. So look at me first off, Nehemiah's faithful reforms. Look with me in verses number 1 and 2. On that same day, and this harkens back to last week and the week before. And by the way, thanks Roger and Ken for preaching while I was gone. I so appreciate you guys stepping in and stepping up for that. I appreciate that so much. And they set this up that on that same day, as the book of Moses was being read to the people, the passage was found that said, no Ammonite or Moabite should ever be permitted to enter the assembly of God. For, here's the reason, they had not provided the Israelites with food and water in the wilderness. Instead, they hired Balaam to curse them, though our God turned the curse into a blessing. So the Ammonites and the Moabites weren't permitted into the assembly to worship. In fact, in a few moments we're going to find out they weren't supposed to intermarry with them. And here's what I want to say about that. That seems super harsh. Like you get one speeding ticket, and then you're not allowed to drive a car anymore. Wouldn't that seem kind of harsh? But that's not what that's about. That's not what that's about. That God was speaking to national Israel. And this is going to happen again here in a few moments. But God was speaking to national Israel. And it just reminds us of the consequences of sin. Sin has devastating consequences. And when we live a life that's apart from God and we don't follow what He wants us to do, in this case, they weren't ever permitted to come back. So He fixed that. And He said, nope, they can't be part of this. That was reform number 1. Look at reform number 2 in verses 7 and 8. When I arrived back in Jerusalem, so he actually, after 12 years, he went back to Artaxerxes and shared how things were going. When I arrived back in Jerusalem, I learned about Eliashib's evil deed in providing Tobiah with a room in the courtyards of the temple of God. I became very upset and threw all of Tobiah's belongings out of the room. Seems harsh, right? Again, sin's devastating consequences that when they walked away from God, when they walked away from following God's exact commands to have a storeroom where the offerings and the tithes would be brought into that would provide for the people of Israel and the Levites, the people that ministered in the temple, they got rid of that room and they gave somebody office space. And he said, nope, I'm going to fix this problem. And he actually threw all of Tobiah's stuff, just dumped it out on the lawn. Hey, parents, you want to hear something funny? If you think you failed parenting, I'm going to make you feel really good about yourself. I had told my son one time, he was probably 10 or 12. Let's see, 90. Yeah, he might be 8 or 10 years of age. And his room was a mess. Right? Welcome to a 10-year-old's life, right? So his room was a mess. And I went in and I said, son, if you don't clean up your room and get all this stuff up off the floor, I'm going to put everything out on the front yard. Well, I'm a man of my word, so he didn't clean up the room. So I got home from work and I threw everything out on the front yard. Man, my wife was not happy about that, I can tell you. I probably shouldn't have done that. So, feel better now? Oh, man. By the time you figure it out, they're gone, you know. Now you're trying to tell them how to do it, and they're right back. Anyway, Ty, this isn't a sermon about parenting, but it seems like I think about it a lot. Number 3, the third reform was, and this was a very egregious neglect, and it doesn't seem like it to us, but it is. Verse number 11. I immediately confronted the leaders. So I'm just diving into the middle of statements. You read the rest when you get home. I immediately confronted the leaders and demanded, why has the temple of God been neglected? When I called all the Levites back, the Levites were the people that took care of the temple, that managed all the worshiping and the sacrifice stuff. When I called the Levites back again and restored them to their proper duties, and once more all the people of Judah began bringing their tithes of grain, new wine, and olive oil to the temple storerooms. So they had ceased to give. Actually, this is mentioned by Malachi about bringing into the storehouse all the tithes and offerings. And they had ceased to do that. And Nehemiah said, no, you can't do that. Now I've got the room. We need to bring all that in so that the Levites don't have to work outside of the temple. They need to get their living from the temple from the temple gifts and offerings. Very simple. But he made this demand of them and said, we just got to follow the Lord. In fact, I didn't put it on the screen, but in verse number 10, it had said this. I wish I'd added it. I also discovered that the Levites had not been given their prescribed portions of food. So they, the singers who were to conduct the worship service, had all returned to work their fields. That was the problem. He said, no, we need them. This is something that God prescribed, not me. Neglect of the Levites. Notice the fourth thing that he did. Verse 17. So I confronted the nobles of Judah. Okay, so you got to read this story. It's almost comical. If you guys don't think there's humor in the Bible, you need to read the Bible. It's got tons of humor in it. So you can back up to verse 15 and read what was going on. Basically, they were working on a Sabbath. The Sabbath is Saturday, by the way. And they were working on a Sabbath, and God had said, no, I don't want you to work on a Sabbath. Why? 6 days is enough. You need to take a day off. Number one, you need the rest. And number two, you need a day to redirect your energy and focus on me. And he supplied this for them. And when Israel walked away from God, one of the things they did was they just got away from honoring a Sabbath. Why? Because you need more money and you get tired of this and you just go like, okay, and you just slip back into your old ways. And they had done that. So look at, what did I tell you? Verse 7. So I confronted the nobles of Judah. Why are you profaning the Sabbath in this evil way? I asked, wasn't it just this sort of thing that your ancestors did that caused our God to bring all this trouble upon us in our city? Again, he's reminding them, don't you realize the reason we wound up in Babylon was for this? And we're barely got the temple back up, the walls built, and you're already doing it again. Wasn't now you are bringing even more wrath upon Israel by permitting the Sabbath to be desecrated this way. Why? Here's the thing. Like why is it so important to keep the Sabbath? And that's not a New Testament thing. We'd be worshiping on Saturday if it was a New Testament thing, right? But it's not. But the concept of keeping the Sabbath for Israel was so important for the reasons I just stated. But how does that apply to us? Like I say, we need a Sabbath. You need time. We need our bodies to rest. All right, so that's not what this message is about, but I think there's a practical application here. Like, you just need downtime. You need a time to say, this is the time I'm going to, number one, give my body some rest, but then number two, then I'm going to refocus my energy on the Lord. And this was so egregious to them. And then the last thing that he did was verse number 23. This is even harder for us to get in our context. About the same time, I realized that some of the men of Judah had married women from Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. Now just hold on a second. This is not talking to people that live in the United States of America. This is talking to national Israel. Throughout the Old Testament, God had chosen Israel that he would work with. So this is not talking to any of the surrounding areas, Babylon or Egypt. This is only talking to national Israel. And he says, you have intermarried with people that worship idols. Doesn't apply to us, okay? And you've intermarried with these people, and that's exactly what happened the last time. And here we go again. But watch Nehemiah's response. Furthermore, half their children spoke the language of Ashdod or of some other people and could not speak the language of Judah at all. So what did Nehemiah do about this? So I confronted them and called down curses on them. Oh, man, I wish this wasn't in the Bible. I beat some of them, and I pulled out their hair. Hey, parents, ever been there? You're like, I want to kill them. I'm not allowed, but I wish I could. You know, pulling out their hair, like really, Nehemiah. He is so worked up about this. Now, first off, let's get this out there, that there's things in the Bible that are descriptive and there's things that are prescriptive. Folks, teenagers, this is not prescriptive, it's descriptive. So let's not be pulling people's hair out and beating people up, all right? Are we on the same page on that? All right, good. Let's not be beating people up, pulling people's hair out. But why did he pull their hair out? This is really fascinating. But like to a man back then, the beard was everything and their hair was everything. And by doing this, however he did it, brought shame on them and demonstrated to them their sinfulness. That's what he did. But I think I was clear. Descriptive, not prescriptive. Did I finish out the verse? I made them swear in the name of God that they would not let their children intermarry with the pagan people of the land. These are like the last 5 things he followed up and did. I call them faithful reforms to get Israel back on the right track. Now, I dissected this into 2 parts because I see 2 things going on. I see his reforms, but then I also see him praying to God and saying, Lord, remember me. 7 times in Nehemiah, the whole book, 13 chapters, he says, remember. A couple of them refer to the enemies, remember what they did. The others, remember me for what I have done. And I just thought, like, one of the questions in the study guide is like, I just want you to process out loud, like, why would somebody be so insistent in their prayer to say, please, Lord, remember me? Because God's not going to forget. But what would drive someone to ask that question? And I don't know. I'm just musing. And I'm 60 years old. I turned 60 in October. And I'm starting to feel old. And I rode my bike 340 miles in 5 days in 80-degree heat. So if anybody wants to go on a bike ride this afternoon, we'll see how 60 I feel then. But you know what I'm saying. It's the stage of life, right? It's the stage of life that I'm in where I'm now spending more time looking back than I am looking forward. So the teenagers think, well, what do you got to look forward to? You're practically dead by now anyway, so, right? Well, but when you're young, 40 seems old, right? So like, but I don't know, man. I got to thinking about this, and like, I just think Nehemiah was feeling it. And he was just saying, like, God, what's my legacy going to be? What is my legacy going to be? And I picked 4 of these things to talk about. We could talk about more, but 4 of them. Notice with me in Nehemiah 5:19. And all the verses are on the screen, so you don't have to keep turning. Remember, oh my God, all that I have done for these people. And bless me for it. God had already blessed him for it. But why would he cry that out? I think he was just saying, Lord, here's what I did. I hope I did the right thing. I hope that I'll be honored for the things that I did. Hopefully nobody will remember that I pulled people's hair out and beat them up, okay? But what does that tell you, though? I'm just chatting with you guys. I'm just chatting. I want to talk this out with you because here's the thing, like there's some things I don't want to be remembered for. But my kids will never forget. Like this, sometimes they'll remind me, hey, remember, I don't want to remember that. But his legacy in this chapter, in chapter 5, was honoring and loving the people. Because remember what the scenario was? They were charging interest, exorbitant interest, so much so they couldn't get themselves back out of slavery. And as soon as they did, they'd have to sell themselves or their kids again in order to get food to eat. Stop charging so much interest. You're not supposed to charge interest to your own people anyway. National Israel, not America, okay? But then I noticed that that's faithful love. Hashtags. So I put a ton of hashtags in here. Like hashtag faithful love. What I've done for these people. Like, I want to ask you, like, are you going to be remembered for how you love people well? Hashtag faithful love. And then the second, now we'll jump to chapter 13, and we'll finish out 13. In chapter 13, verse number 14, it says this, remember this good deed, oh my God, and do not forget all that I have faithfully done for the temple. So the first one was for these people. Now he says, for the temple of my God and its services. And this is said right after the whole Tobiah storeroom situation. And he says, remember me for what I've done for your temple. And I hashtag this faithful devotion. He was not only devoted to God, but he was devoted to the place where you worship God. New Testament, the place where we worship God is everywhere. Not a place, it's a person and a people. But in the Old Testament, the temple was the centrality of everything. And he says, faithful service. Actually, hashtag faithful service. Sorry, the next one will be devotion. Faithful service. And then look with me in verse number 22. And I think I put the whole verse. No, I just put the last part of the verse. Remember this good deed also, O my God, have compassion on me according to your great and unfailing love. And this was said right after the reform of they were profaning the Sabbath. He might have had a little regret on this one, especially after beating people up and pulling people's hair out. I think maybe he had a little bit of regret there. And it's just interesting, I'm just musing as a Bible teacher here, that have compassion on me. Maybe I could have done a little better with those guys. But please have compassion on me for all that I've done for the Sabbath. And I hashtag that faithful devotion. Faithful devotion. He wanted to be known as someone who honored God, honored people, and in those days honored the Sabbath. And in verses number 30 and 31 here, it says this. And I kept the context in there for this one. So I purged out everything, foreign and assigned tasks to the priest and the Levites. So he got rid of all the foreign objects. And then he assigned tasks to the priests and the Levites, making certain that they each knew their or his work. Why? For 70 years they'd been in captivity. For 70 years they hadn't been worshiping. For 70 years they hadn't been sacrificing innocent animals, because it's the blood that covers our sin, right? Temporarily in the Old Testament, through Jesus in the New Testament. And they had gotten out of practice, and then they had died, and their kids are coming along, and they don't know how. So he's getting this reinstituting and starting it back up again. He said, I assigned them tasks, making certain that each knew his work. Verse 31, I also made sure that the supply of wood for the altar and the first portions of the harvest were brought at the proper times. Like, he not only taught them what to do, but he also helped them get the supplies necessary to get the job done. Can you see how Nehemiah was like all in on this? He understood the assignment. And then he says this, remember this in my favor, oh my God. And I put a hashtag faithful leadership. Faithful leadership. He says at the very end, I've brought all these reforms. I helped get them. I mean, it's a miracle of God that they built the walls in 52 days. And all the tough stuff of life that he had to challenge and confront. And now he's at the end of this journey, and he's looking back at it, and he says to God, remember this in my favor, oh my God. And here's, I just want to talk to you, like just from me to you, okay? So that's the message. You got the message. I'll have some next steps here in a few moments. But like I'm thinking about this a lot these days. Like I went to Florida last week, rode my bike 5 days in a row, only rode in the rain once, and it was in the mid-80s. Had a church said, hey, we're looking for a pastor. I might have sent a moving van for my furniture, folks. I'm just kidding, okay? They're like, oh. No. I made a commitment here, okay? I made a commitment, and I'm going to stay. I'm going to stay. Some days I don't want to because it's so much warmer down there. But then we looked at housing prices and we said, okay, this Mount Pleasant works. Right. I'm just talking, okay? Just hear me out, okay? 6 years old. I'm looking, what could come next? This came next. So I'm doing what came next, okay? I also am spending some time looking back over my life. And there's some things I wish weren't there, you know? I'm just saying. There's some things that are part of my legacy. I had a situation over the week. You're on vacation. Actually, we paid our own money to get to do this, and then we raised funds for an organization, and then I wasn't having a bad time. I wasn't having a good time. And then, can you just hear your pastor talk from his heart for a minute? Is that okay? Like, I had anxiety the whole time. Who goes on vacation and has anxiety? In Florida. Like, and then I'm going like, what is wrong with me? Well, maybe I drank too much coffee, you know, because that'll cause me to have this a little bit. Like, I don't think that's it. Like, what is wrong? Why am I on vacation in practical paradise and I'm anxious as all get out? What is it? And I just started thinking about my legacy. Like, and then I asked this question, like, what is wrong with me? Have you ever asked that question before? Well, stop it. On the authority of God's word and Jesus Christ, there's nothing wrong with you, okay? And you got some quirkiness. Welcome to the club. But like, at the core, I am who I am. You are who you are, right? But it just got me thinking about my legacy, my faithful legacy. And of all weeks to preach this message, like I had already had this title way before I left. And I'm thinking about it the whole time, like, what's my legacy going to be? I called a life coach on Monday and just said, hey, I need to process. And I did. We processed for 2 hours and I had 2 pages of notes, some takeaways. And I walked away going like, okay, I can attack this. Now I got a handle on it. Like what was going on with me at that point? Because here's the thing. Like I want to have a faithful legacy. And I want to have a faithful legacy that loves others. And I'm not an imposition to somebody, which is how I felt some of the time. So here's the question I want to ask you. Like, what's your legacy going to be? I want you to ask that question. Teenager, I want you to ask that question this morning. I know you're like, this is a long ways off. No, it's not. It's today. Decisions you're making today, right? Your parents tell you this, so you probably don't want to hear me say it. But the decisions you're making today are going to impact your future in ways you have no idea, right? And I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying. It's the truth. So I've got some take actions for you here, okay? So take action number 1 to build a faithful legacy is this. Number 1, be faithful to God. Just be faithful to God. That's all you got to do. Just be faithful to God, just like Nehemiah was. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to sin. You're going to do things that are wrong. But here's the deal. In the end, be faithful to God. Just be faithful. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Number 2, be faithful to others. Love others. Love others. Love well. Jesus boiled down. I'm going to walk out of the frame here real quick because if I don't get a drink, I'm going to start hacking on everybody. So hang on. Jesus boiled down the entire Old Testament, the Sabbath, the myriad of people outside, all of that, the temple worship, all of that. He obliterated all of that. And he said this, love as I have loved you. He summed up the Old Testament in its fulfillment, I'm preaching a little bit here, in himself with a verb, love. How are you loving? How's your loving going? Take action. In your key relationships, your friends, your spouse. By the way, being kind to one another applies to your spouse too. Sometimes it doesn't feel like you want to, and I'm just talking about me. You guys can join in if you like. In your parenting, We're grandparents now. Like, how can we be faithful to others in our grandparenting, in our church? In our church, how can you be faithful here? How's God calling you to step up to the plate and be faithful? Well, here's one phrase I keep hearing around here a lot. We used to. We used to. Hey, man, I love hearing that. Hey, praise God for how God has used Wellspring in the past, and how He's using us today, and how He's going to use us in the future. But we used to isn't here anymore. How can we just be faithful to the task at hand? How can we just be faithful? And what is God calling you? Because in a small church like ours, we need all hands on deck. Everyone needs to put their hand on the plow. If you're coming and you just need to hang out, there's plenty of room for you. But I'm challenging you to step up and be faithful to others in key relationships. And one of those is in our church family, and then outward into the community. Number 3, be faithful in every season of life. Be faithful. Teenagers, just be faithful. Just show up. Well, I don't know how. Just show up. That's all you got to do. Parents, you're in the middle of it. You're in the thick of it. You're looking at us empty nesters like, will we ever get there? You will. But just be faithful and quit watching HGTV. Oh, my gosh. Amen and amen. I'm not even allowed. My wife's watching the day online. I'm going to be so in trouble. Anybody want to go out to lunch afterwards? So like I'm not even allowed to have the paper towels on the countertop. I just want a paper towel when I want a paper towel, folks. Is that too hard to ask? Oh, no. Chip and Joanna Gaines. It's all got to be off of the... Just show up. Just do what you can. You got dirty laundry and stuff everywhere. Stop it. Be faithful. Let yourself off the hook. Man, I've gone way too long on this. Here's the conclusion. Students, I wrote it out so I wouldn't forget. You're building a legacy right now. Build it. And forgive yourself for the mistakes. Parents, same thing. And hey, let me talk to the empty nesters in the room, okay? So IR1. We've made some mistakes in the past. And some of those mistakes haunt us. Some of those mistakes from the past are keeping you from fulfilling God's plan and purpose for your life right now. How do I know this? Because I feel it. I feel it for me. I know you guys think I'm like practically perfect, like an angel, I struggle just like everybody, right? But you've got some things in your past. Deal with them. Let them go. And now you've got a chance, empty nesters, to be faithful, to leave a legacy. And you say, well, I've screwed up my entire life. I'm telling you, it's not too late. It's not too late. Just be faithful. That's what I'm calling our church family. Just be faithful.